A candle melts away deadly secrets. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Share your location in the comments. I always enjoy reading them. Into the mystery. If you've never watched a man wage war without moving more than 2 fingers, you've missed one of the cleaner entertainments New York has to offer. I'm talking about Nero Wolfe in his office chair, with a book open like a shield, a glass within reach, and the air in the room arranged to his liking as if it paid rent. That afternoon the air was doing its duty, quiet, temperate, and obedient, when the doorbell rang. Not the telephone, not the private line that brings in the sort of trouble that wears a fedora and pretends it's on your side. The front doorbell, which means either delivery, a stranger, or one of Fritz's small cruelties to my digestion. That Wolfe didn't look up from his book. I did, because I'm paid to. From the hall I called, "I'm going," and headed to the front door with the practiced resignation of a man who knows that in this house the only thing allowed to disturb the routine without a permit is an orchid. When I opened up, I didn't get a fedora. I got a candle, not a metaphor, an actual candle. Fat, pale, and dressed up like it was going to a wedding. It sat on the stoop in a glass cylinder sealed with wax, as if somebody had mailed a little piece of sanctity and forgot to include the letter. Behind it, on the sidewalk, stood the messenger, a woman in a camel hair coat that cost more than my monthly suits, with a face that looked as though it had been designed for still photographs and then forced into the nuisance of living. She was bareheaded, and though the wind had teeth and she held herself like she'd been told all her life that doors should open before she reached them. "Mr. Goodwin," she said. "That's me." "Sometimes." Her eyes flicked past my shoulder, toward the inside of the house, as if she expected to see a butler holding a silver tray with my name engraved on it. "I need to speak to Nero Wolfe," she said. "Now." "Well, that's a popular feeling," I told her. "But it's not a public service. Do you have an appointment?" "No." "Then you have a problem." Her gaze dropped to the candle, then rose again. "I brought something." I noticed. "It belongs inside," she said, and the way she said inside made the word sound like it had a lock on it. I didn't touch the cylinder. In the Wolfe household, objects left on the doorstep fall into 3 categories: harmless, illegal, and explosive. Fritz deals with the first, I deal with the second, and the third usually deals with us. "What's your name?" I asked. For half a second, she hesitated. Not because she forgot it, because she weighed whether I deserved it. "Claudia Vane," she said at last. I knew the name. It wasn't on my Christmas card list, but it was on the sort of list you can't avoid in New York if you read a newspaper or ride in a cab with a talkative driver. Claudia Vane was connected, publicly, intimately, and expensively, to a little constellation of philanthropic boards, museum benefits, and one of those foundations that sounded noble until you saw the tax filings. Claudia Vane was also, if you believed the gossip, recently detached from a husband who had belonged to her the way a good building belongs to its architect, by contract and pride. "So come in," I said, and stepped aside. She didn't move. She pointed at the candle. "That goes in first." Now, I don't spook easy. I've been shot at in this city by men who couldn't spell my name, but there was something about her insistence, precise, ritualistic, that made the hairs on the back of my neck consider applying for overtime. "If it goes in first," I said, "it goes in with me holding it." "Fine." I crouched, took the glass cylinder in both hands, and lifted it. It was heavier than it looked. The wax seal at the top had been pressed with a stamp, an emblem, not a monogram. I couldn't read it, but it looked official, which is the first sign something's crooked. I brought it over the threshold. Claudia Vane followed, and as soon as she crossed the line, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since childhood. I shut the door. The Wolfe's voice came from the office, rich and annoyed. "Archie, you have admitted a draft." "I admitted a woman," I called back. "The draft came along for the ride." I carried the candle down the hall into the office. Wolfe sat as always, big as a bear who had learned manners and then regretted it, with his book open, his eyes now resting on the glass cylinder like it had committed a discourtesy. Claudia stood in the doorway until I waved her in. She moved with a careful grace, as if every step was recorded for later criticism. Wolfe studied her face. He can do that without being rude, which is one of his best tricks. "Mr. Wolfe," she said. Wolfe's lips barely moved. "Madam, my name is Claudia Vane. I'm acquainted with it. I need your help. You need many things." Wolfe's eyes shifted to the candle. "You have brought an object into my house without my consent. That is a discourtesy." Her chin lifted. "It's a warning." "That is worse." I set the cylinder on the corner of Wolfe's desk, keeping it a good 6 inches away from his papers. Fritz would have had a coronary if I'd put a wax-sealed mystery next to Wolfe's correspondence, but Fritz wasn't here to stop me. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction. That's the Wolfe version of sprinting. "This," Claudia said, indicating the candle, "was delivered to me this morning. It was on my breakfast tray." "I do not envy your breakfast," Wolfe said. "Explain." She took a breath. "It came with a note." "Where is it?" I asked. "In my purse." She opened a small bag, extracted an envelope, and held it out. I took it, because Wolfe doesn't do handoffs unless the object is a menu. I opened it carefully. Inside was a plain card, thick and creamy, with neat printing. "When it burns, it tells the truth." Underneath, "Light it in the brownstone. No signature, no flourish." Just those 2 lines, smug as a judge. I handed the card to Wolfe. He read it once, then again, slower. His eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with distaste, the way he looks at a man who insists that ketchup belongs on fish. "An attempt at melodrama," Wolfe said. "A clumsy one?" "It's not melodrama," Claudia said sharply. "It's instruction." Wolfe's eyes rose to her. "You are not in a position to issue instructions in my home." She held his gaze. She had nerve, I'll give her that. Most people lose a little height under Wolfe's stare, like air leaking out of a tire. "I'm not issuing instructions," she said. "I'm begging you, but the instructions matter." "Why?" Wolfe asked. So Claudia's mouth tightened. "Because I think someone is trying to destroy me." "That is a common suspicion in Manhattan," Wolfe said. "It is seldom accurate." "It's accurate," she said. Then, as if the words had cut her tongue, she softened her tone. "Mr. Wolfe, I am not easily frightened. I have been threatened before. I have been sued, slandered, followed by photographers, and—" She stopped, as if listing more would feel like vanity. "This is different." Wolfe's fingers touched the base of the glass cylinder, but he didn't move it. "Describe different." "The candle isn't a candle," Claudia said. I blinked. "It looks like one." "It's layered," she said. "It's made of more than wax." "It's heavy. And the seal—" She nodded at the top. "That stamp is not decorative. It's the stamp of the St. Bartholomew Guild." I knew St. Bartholomew. Not personally, but as an institution. The Guild was a quiet outfit tied to one of the older churches. Fundraisers, donors, old money with pious stationery. You couldn't spit on Park Avenue without hitting someone who sat on its committee. Wolfe's eyebrows rose a millimeter, which in his language is a full paragraph. "The St. Bartholomew Guild," he repeated. "Yes," Claudia said. "I sit on its board." "And therefore you believe the object is connected to them?" "I believe it's connected to a secret," she said. That got a new sound in the room. Not fear. Something thinner and sharper, like ice cracking. Wolfe leaned back. "Madame, you are either being extorted or being invited into a childish intrigue. In either case, I am disinclined." She reached into her coat pocket and drew out something folded. Not money, not a check, a photograph. She put it on Wolfe's desk, face down, without letting herself look at it. "I brought that because I thought you'd say no," she said. Wolfe didn't touch it. "You thought correctly." "Turn it over," she said. Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. That meant, "Archie, do your job and keep my fingers clean." I turned the photograph over. It showed a room I recognized because I've walked through it 100 times. Our front hall. The picture had been taken from outside, through the glass of the door, angled so you could see into the hall and down toward the office entrance. In the hall, caught mid-step, head turned, was me. The photo was recent. I was wearing the tie I had on that morning. I felt my scalp tighten. Claudia's voice was quiet. "That was in the envelope with the note." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "How was it delivered?" "On my tray," she said. In my house? No one saw it come in." I stared at the picture again. It wasn't a casual snapshot. The angle was deliberate. Whoever took it knew the house, or had studied it. And they had done it without setting off any alarms. Our alarms included me. Wolfe's eyes moved from the photograph to me, then to the candle. His mouth did not show any of what he thought, which is one of the reasons I get paid. "I dislike," he said slowly, "being observed." "Then you understand," Claudia said. "I am being observed constantly. Someone has access to my home. Someone has access to my reputation. And now," her eyes flicked to the candle, "someone is insisting that I bring this into yours." Wolfe's voice went colder. "To disturb the sanctity of my brownstone." "Yes," she said. "To disturb it." I could feel where this was going, and I didn't like it. So there are plenty of ways to make a living, and one of them is not inviting strangers to play games inside Wolfe's house. Wolfe's lips compressed. He looked at Claudia as if she were a problem in Latin that had been incorrectly declined. "What do you want of me?" he asked. "I want you to tell me who is doing this," she said. "And what they want, and—" She swallowed. "If there is truth in that candle, I want to know what it will say before it says it in public." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "You fear disgrace." "I fear a particular disgrace," she said. "One that would not merely embarrass me. It would ruin other people. People who do not deserve it." "That is an interesting addition," Wolfe said. "Often the fear of ruin is entirely selfish." Claudia's gaze held steady. "I've been selfish, but I am not a monster." Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair, an audible punctuation mark. "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe said without looking away from Claudia, "you will take the candle from my desk." I picked it up, relieved to be doing something that didn't involve my face in a photograph. "And place it," Wolfe continued, "on the side table at a distance." I did. Wolfe addressed Claudia. "Madame, you have violated the proprieties of my home and attempted to enlist me in an affair that appears to be, at best, an elaborate intimidation. My inclination is to refuse you." Her mouth tightened. "Then why haven't you?" Wolfe's eyes drifted to the photograph again. "Because someone has made the error of involving my household. That's not my fault." "No," Wolfe said, "but it is now my inconvenience." He leaned back, his bulk settling into the chair as if it were designed around him. He glanced toward the clock, then away, and the movement told me something else. He was calculating his day, his schedule, his orchids, and the exact amount of annoyance he was willing to tolerate before dinner. "Tell me," Wolfe said, "what you have not said." Claudia hesitated. Wolfe waited. He can wait better than any man alive. It's a weapon. Most people fill silence the way they fill a glass. Too fast, and with whatever is nearest. Finally, she spoke. "The candle came from the guild," she said. "Not officially, but the stamp. Only a small circle has access to it." "Names," Wolfe said. She took a breath. "Marion Rook, Calvin Fife, Jonas Brill and—" She paused, like the last name had teeth. "Elliot Harrow." I recognized one. Harrow. Elliot Harrow was a man who appeared in society pages the way mildew appears in basements, quietly, inevitably, and always in the wrong place. He was a donor, a collector, a patron, and, if you trusted rumors, a man with a taste for leverage. Wolfe's eyes sharpened at the list. "And your relation to these persons?" Claudia's posture stiffened. "We served together." "That is vague." She looked directly at Wolfe. "We have served together in ways that were not recorded." Ah, there it was. A secret with a collar on it. Wolfe's expression remained composed, but I saw a tiny shift. Interest, born not of excitement, but of opportunity. Wolfe likes a puzzle that comes to him. He dislikes one that drags mud onto his carpet. This one was doing both. "You are implying," Wolfe said, "that you and these individuals share a concealed action, possibly improper." "Possibly criminal," Claudia said, and the words came out like she hated them. For a second the room seemed to thicken, as if the air itself had decided it wanted a closer look. Wolfe's voice became very precise. "If you have participated in a crime, madam, my services are not yours by right." "I'm not asking by right," she said. "I'm asking by necessity." Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. Then his eyes flicked to me. "Archie," he said, "what time is it?" "Nearly 4. "And Fritz?" "In the kitchen, plotting against my cholesterol." Wolfe nodded once. "Madame, you will remain. Mr. Goodwin will bring you beer if you require it, though I doubt you do. You will tell me the entire truth of your concealed action. Every detail. If you omit a fact, I will know, and you will leave my house without assistance." Claudia's throat moved. "If I tell you, you will despise me." "I already disapprove of you," Wolfe said serenely. "The question is whether I will be compelled to act." She stared at him. Then her gaze slid, unwillingly, toward the candle on the side table. "It burns," she murmured. "And it tells the truth." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "In my house, madam, truth does not require a flame." I shifted my weight, keeping my eyes on the glass cylinder. Whoever had put that thing on her breakfast tray had aimed it like a cue ball. A gentle tap, and the whole rack would break. And the fact that I was in the photograph meant the shot had been lined up with care. In the Wolfe household, we handle care the way we handle dynamite. Slowly, with distance, and with one eye on the door. Wolfe settled back, so immovable, and said the words that told me my afternoon was officially gone. "Begin." Claudia Vane sat on the yellow chair as if it might accuse her of something. Wolfe had not invited her to sit there. He had merely failed to forbid it, and in this house that counted as conditional permission. Her hands were folded in her lap, but the fingers kept tightening and loosening, like they were trying to remember how to be hands instead of instruments. Wolfe watched her in the way a cat watches a mouse that has begun to explain itself. I went to the sideboard, got 2 bottles of beer and a glass. I set the glass near Wolfe's right hand, where he likes things to appear, and put 1 bottle at Claudia's elbow without asking. She didn't touch it. Wolfe didn't either. He said, "Begin," again, as if the first time had been an opening bell and she hadn't heard it. Claudia swallowed. "It was 2 years ago," she said. Wolfe's eyelids lowered slightly. "Chronology is an instrument, madam, not a refuge. Proceed." "It began as a fundraiser," she said, and now her voice had that particular quality you hear from people testifying in their own heads. Flat, careful, trying to keep emotion from contaminating facts. The St. Bartholomew Guild wanted to purchase a set of manuscripts, medieval, illuminated, very rare. The church would display them once a year. The rest of the time they'd be protected in a private vault. "A vault owned by a private person," Wolfe murmured. "Yes," she said. Elliot Harrow offered to underwrite the purchase. He made it sound benevolent, but he also made it clear the guild would owe him influence, access. And you, Wolfe said, were among those who arranged this indebtedness. Claudia's chin lifted a fraction. I was the one who introduced Harrow to the guild. Ah, Wolfe said softly. Now we have a point of leverage. Her eyes flashed, and for an instant the varnish cracked. I didn't do it for leverage. I did it because the guild needed money and because Harrow... She stopped, and her mouth tightened. Because Harrow was attentive. I made a note in my head. Attentive meant trouble, and trouble meant he probably collected people the way he collected manuscripts. Wolfe said, "Continue." The manuscripts were purchased, Claudia said. But then, 6 months later, there was a complication. A representative from the original seller, an Italian dealer, contacted Marion Rook. She was the guild treasurer, so he claimed one of the manuscripts had been sold unlawfully, that it was stolen property. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. And was it? Claudia didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough, but Wolfe waited anyway because he likes the full sentence. Yes, she said finally. At least, we were told it was. There was documentation, a claim, legal threats. Marion panicked. Calvin Fife panicked. He's the one with connections at the museum world. Jonas Brill, she hesitated. Jonas is a lawyer. Of course, Wolfe said, as if Providence had been considerate enough to make it tidy. We met, Claudia went on. Private, in Harrow's townhouse. He said he could fix it. I asked, fix it how? Claudia's eyes flicked to me, then away. By paying. Bribe, I supplied. Call it what you like, she said sharply. Yes, then winced, as if the sharpness had cost her. Wolfe's voice was calm. Mr. Goodwin's vocabulary is often vulgar. It is nevertheless useful. Claudia took a breath. Harrow said the dealer wanted money to make the claim disappear. Harrow said he had already negotiated, but he needed the guild's cooperation. The guild didn't have the funds. He proposed that we use a portion of the endowment, quietly, then replenish it over time through alternative donations. Alternative, Wolfe repeated, meaning concealed. Yes, she said, meaning falsified. Jonas Brill arranged the paperwork. Marion Rook signed. Calvin Fife found donors who didn't ask questions, and her voice wobbled for the first time. I persuaded the board it was a temporary necessity. Wolfe sat absolutely still. The only movement was his eyes, and they were doing arithmetic. You committed fraud, he said, not accusing, simply naming. And to conceal it, you created further fraud. Claudia's throat worked. Yes. I leaned back in my chair because when a confession lands in this room, it's best to give it space to settle. Wolfe said, and now someone possesses evidence of this. Yes, she said. Or claims to. The candle, her gaze went toward the side table as if the thing had gravity. It came with the instruction to bring it here. I don't know what it contains, but the message implies exposure. When it burns, it tells the truth, Wolfe quoted, and the words sounded more ridiculous spoken in his voice, which I found comforting. Do you suppose it is a novelty? Some juvenile trick? No. Claudia's answer was immediate. Harrow does nothing juvenile. Wolfe's eyes flickered. Then you suspect Harrow? I suspect everyone, she said. But... She hesitated. Harrow has been displeased with me lately. I lifted an eyebrow. You break his heart? She looked like she wanted to slap me and couldn't afford the energy. I refused him. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Refused him what? Claudia's lips tightened. A vote. Control. He wanted the guild to transfer the manuscripts permanently into his custody for protection. He wanted the board to authorize it without a public record. And you opposed, Wolfe said. I did, she said. I pushed back. I told him the guild would be ruined if it looked like we were letting a donor purchase a sacred artifact. He smiled and said the guild would be ruined if it looked like we had stolen one. Wolfe's mouth compressed. Blackmail. Claudia nodded once. But I thought... She stopped, so that her eyes looked suddenly tired. I thought I could outlast him, that he wouldn't risk his own reputation. And then, Wolfe said, you found the candle on your breakfast tray. Yes. Wolfe shifted his gaze to me. Archie, the photograph. I tapped the edge of it with a finger. Still flattering. How was it obtained? Wolfe asked. If we assume it's real, I said, it was taken from outside, through our front door glass. That means someone stood on the sidewalk and pointed a camera. Probably a long lens, maybe from across the street, maybe from a car. But the angle is wrong for across the street. It's close, which means they were right there. Claudia's eyes widened. Then you were watched. Sure, I said. But that's the part that bothers Wolfe. Me, I'm used to it. Wolfe ignored my modesty. The more significant implication, he said, is that the person possesses a clear image of my hall. That image is a declaration. I can intrude. I can observe. I can disturb. Claudia said, then you will help me. Wolfe looked at her. Do not presume. She clenched her hands. Mr. Wolfe, I will pay any fee. You will not, Wolfe said. You will pay a fee I name, or you will pay nothing and depart. Money is not an argument. It is a condition. Claudia's mouth tightened, but she nodded. Name it, Wolfe said. First, the truth, which you have begun to provide. Second, your cooperation without evasion. Third, he paused, and the pause had weight. The candle. Claudia blinked. The candle. Wolfe's eyes moved to the side table. It has been introduced into my home. So it is therefore my responsibility to determine its nature. Her voice went thin. You mean you will light it? No, Wolfe said, and there was faint contempt in the word. I mean I will have Mr. Goodwin determine what it is, how it functions, and who delivered it. If it is merely wax, we will treat it as wax. If it is an instrument, we will treat it as a weapon. In either case, it will not dictate terms. Claudia stared at him, then at me. But the note said, the note is insolent, Wolfe snapped, and then he was calm again. I do not obey insolence. That was Wolfe, and if you're wondering why I don't quit, that's why. There's something soothing about a man who can insult a threat into shrinking. I stood. Okay. First step. How did it get onto your breakfast tray? Claudia shook her head. I don't know. My housekeeper brings the tray, and she swore she didn't place it there. She thought it was a gift. Your staff, I said. How many? 3, she said. Housekeeper, cook, and a driver. Any of them have access to your private mail? Deliveries? All of them at times, she admitted. Wolfe said, and the stamp? The St. Bartholomew Guild stamp is controlled by Marion Rook, Claudia said. Officially. Officially, Wolfe repeated, as if the word had a smell. I looked at the candle again. The wax seal at the top, pressed with that emblem. If the emblem was genuine, it narrowed our circle. If it was forged, it widened it to include anyone with a talent for petty craftsmanship, which in New York is half the population. Wolfe said, Archie, bring the candle here. I did, carefully, like it was a baby rattlesnake. Wolfe leaned forward and examined the wax seal without touching it. Mr. Goodwin, he said, take a blade and cut the wax. Gently. If it contains a mechanism, do not damage it. Sure, I said, because I always carry my candle dissection kit. Wolfe's eyes moved to the drawer in his desk where he kept the small penknife he pretended was beneath him. I opened the drawer, took it, and held the cylinder steady with my left hand while I worked the blade under the wax. The seal resisted, then gave with a faint crack. A whiff of something, sweet but not floral, escaped like a memory of incense. I lifted the wax ring away and eased the top free. Inside the glass cylinder, embedded in the candle's core, was a thin strip of something darker than wax. Not paper, not cloth. It looked like a ribbon of metal. Claudia made a small sound, like a breath being taken wrong. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Interesting. I touched the ribbon with the knife tip. It was firm. It didn't tear. It had tiny markings, etched or punched, running along it like the teeth of a zipper. "Is that?" Claudia began. Wolfe said, "Yes, madam. It appears to be a recording medium or a message encoded." I stared down at it. Somebody made a candle into a confession. Wolfe's voice was very quiet. Or into a trap. I looked up at him. Either way, the guy's got style. Wolfe's eyes lifted to mine, and his gaze was pure instruction. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "you will go out." "Of course," I said. "Because the one thing you hate more than being observed is leaving it unobserved." Wolfe ignored that. "You will visit the St. Bartholomew Guild offices. You will see Marion Rook, and you will observe her reaction to the mention of this stamp. You will also see Mr. Jonas Brill, if possible, and Mr. Calvin Fife. You will not see Mr. Harrow." I blinked. "Why not Harrow?" "Because," Wolfe said, "if Harrow is the one who set this in motion, he expects you to. I prefer to disappoint expectations." Claudia leaned forward. "Then what do we do with the candle?" Wolfe's eyes went to it and then away. "We do not burn it. Not yet. We will first ascertain who wishes it to burn, and why." I capped the cylinder again loosely, set it back on the side table, and made a mental note to keep it away from Fritz's pantry. Knowing Fritz, he'd think it was a new spice jar. Wolfe said to Claudia, "You will remain available. You will not telephone anyone. You will not warn your associates. If you do, madam, you will cease to be a client and become an obstruction." Claudia's lips parted. She wanted to protest. She didn't. She only nodded once, and the nod looked like surrender. I went to the hall for my coat and hat, and as I reached the front door, I caught myself glancing at the glass panel. It showed the street like a polite mirror. On the sidewalk outside, a man was standing with a newspaper open. He wasn't reading it. He was facing our door. And when my eyes met his through the glass, he lowered the paper a fraction, smiled like we shared a joke, and turned away, slowly, casually, already sure he'd been seen. The man with the newspaper didn't hurry. That was the part I disliked most. If he'd bolted, I could have dismissed him as an amateur with a bad nerve. Instead, he folded the paper with care, tucked it under his arm, and strolled east as if he had an appointment with time itself. I opened the door and stepped out onto the stoop. "Afternoon," I said. He didn't turn around. He raised one hand in a vague salute and kept walking. I watched him until he reached the corner. He didn't look back. Men who don't look back are either very confident or very stupid. In my experience, the first group is much smaller. I shut the door and leaned against it for a second, cataloguing the moment. Then I went back to the office. Wolfe hadn't moved. Claudia Vane had. She was standing now, one hand on the back of the chair, staring at the candle like it might crawl. "There was a man outside," I said. Wolfe's eyes lifted. "Describe." "Mid-40, brown coat, newspaper as a prop. He wanted me to see him see us." Wolfe grunted. A declaration, then, and as I suspected. Claudia's voice was tight. "Was it Harrow?" "I didn't get his autograph," I said, "but if it was, he's subtler than his reputation." Wolfe's gaze fixed on her. "You will remain here. Mr. Goodwin will proceed." She hesitated. "I should return home." "My staff—" "No," Wolfe said flatly. "If you return home, you re-enter a compromised environment. Here at least the compromise is mutual." That landed. She sank back into the chair, pale but obedient. I grabbed my coat. "I'll call Saul," I said. Wolfe nodded. "Have him observe Mr. Harrow, discreetly." I went out again, this time without ceremony, and walked 2 blocks before using a payphone. Saul Panzer answered on the second ring, sounding like a man who was already halfway somewhere else. "Saul," I said, "how do you feel about watching a philanthropist with expensive habits?" "I feel generous," he said. "Name?" "Elliot Harrow, townhouse on 72nd. He likes manuscripts and leverage." Saul whistled softly. "I'll bring my better shoes." I hung up and headed downtown. The St. Bartholomew Guild offices occupied a respectable slice of limestone near Madison, quiet, tasteful, and allergic to scandal. Inside, the air smelled of polish and old paper. A receptionist with careful hair and a voice trained not to remember names asked me how she could help. "I'm here to see Marion Rook," I said. "It's about a donation irregularity." Her smile froze, then thawed into something professional. "One moment." That was my first confirmation. Marion Rook's office was large but defensive. Desk positioned like a barricade, chairs placed for control. And she rose when I entered, tall and angular, with eyes that measured costs before pleasures. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "to what do I owe this visit?" I didn't sit until she gestured. "I represent Nero Wolfe." Her mouth tightened. "I see. Do you?" I asked, because I'd hate to explain him twice. She folded her hands. "What does Mr. Wolfe want?" I took the photograph from my pocket. Not the one of me, but a close-up I'd snapped of the candle's wax seal before leaving. I slid it across the desk. Her eyes dropped. She didn't touch it. "That stamp," I said. "Care to tell me how many people can use it?" "Officially," she said. "Officially," I agreed. "Myself," she said. "And my assistant. Occasionally Calvin Fife, for donor correspondence." "Unofficially?" I asked. Her gaze snapped up. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I'm accusing the stamp of getting around," I said. "It turned up on a breakfast tray this morning. That suggests mobility." Her face went pale in a very specific way. The way people look when they realize a lock they trusted is decorative. "Who?" she demanded. "That's what I'm here to ask," I said. "And before you answer, let me tell you something. The candle it's sealed isn't wax alone. It carries information." Her breath caught. She looked at the door, then back at me. "You should leave." "Not yet." "You don't understand." "I understand leverage," I said, "and I understand panic. Right now, you're doing one of them." She stood abruptly. "If Elliot Harrow is involved," I leaned back. "You said his name, not me." She froze. I let the silence work. It did. "He asked for the stamp," she said finally. Weeks ago. Said he wanted to send a ceremonial gift. I refused. "And he smiled," she said bitterly. "Then Calvin told me later he'd already lent it to him, just for an hour." "Calvin Fife," I said. "Where can I find him?" "Lunch Club on 49th, she said, "if he hasn't already fled the city." I stood. "Thank you, Miss Rook. Don't leave town." Her laugh was short and humorless. "I won't. I don't think any of us will." Outside, I took a breath and walked fast. The lunch club was quiet, exclusive, and designed for men who preferred their sins wrapped in linen. Calvin Fife fit right in. Round face, genial eyes, the kind of man who shook hands like he was grateful for the opportunity. "Archie," he said when he saw me. "What a surprise." "Life's full of them," I said, sliding into the chair opposite. "How's generosity treating you?" His smile flickered. "I beg your pardon?" "The stamp," I said softly. "You loaned it." He stiffened. That was a courtesy. "To whom?" I asked. He hesitated a fraction too long. "Harrow." "And the candle?" I pressed. His hand shook as he lifted his glass. I didn't know about a candle. Don't insult me, I said. You knew he wanted to send a message. Calvin's eyes darted. He said it was symbolic. Everything's symbolic to a man who likes control, I said. Did he show you what was inside? Calvin swallowed. No, he said it was a safeguard. I stood. Calvin, if that thing burns, it won't just tell the truth. It'll decide which truth. His face crumpled. He said it would never be lit. I left him there, staring at his napkin like it might save him. By the time I got back to the brownstone, the dusk had settled. The house felt different, tenser, like it was holding its breath. Wolfe was in the office. Claudia sat rigidly. The candle stood where I'd left it. Saul reports, Wolfe said before I spoke. Mr. Harrow has not left his townhouse today. He has, however, received 2 visitors and made 3 telephone calls. I nodded. He's setting the board. Wolfe's eyes moved to the candle. What did you learn? I told him, Rook, Fife, the stamp, Harrow's request. Wolfe listened without interruption. When I finished, he said, as expected, Mr. Harrow is exerting pressure through distributed guilt. Claudia's voice was strained. Then he has proof. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps he has only the promise of proof. I frowned. Meaning, Wolfe said, that the candle may be a bluff, or it may contain selective evidence. And in either case, its power lies not in what it reveals, but in who controls its ignition. As if summoned by the word, there was a faint sound in the room, a soft click. I turned. The candle's wick, untouched, unlit, had shifted. Just a millimeter, enough to tell us it hadn't been alone. Claudia gasped. It moved. Wolfe's face hardened. No, he said. It was moved. I stepped closer, scanning the room. Nothing else was disturbed. No window open, no door. Wolfe's voice was iron. Mr. Goodwin, inspect the cylinder. I lifted it. The wax seal, partially broken earlier, was gone. And beneath it, etched into the inner glass, were 4 words that had not been there before. Tonight. All must attend. Wolfe leaned back, massive and still. So, he said quietly, Mr. Harrow has escalated. Claudia whispered, Attend what? Wolfe's eyes were cold, calculating, and entirely awake. My office, he said. For a second, none of us spoke, because the sentence, tonight, all must attend, sat in the room like a stink bomb that didn't disperse. Claudia Vane's eyes were fixed on the cylinder in my hands. That wasn't there, she said, as if saying it aloud might make it impossible. It was, I said, somewhere, just not on the glass. Wolfe's gaze moved, slow and exact, around the office. Door, windows, rug, the corner where the safe was hidden behind civility. He wasn't looking for a footprint. He was looking for a pattern. Mr. Goodwin, he said, did you remove the seal entirely? I cut it, I said. I didn't peel it off like a banana. And you replaced the top. Loosely, I admitted. Then someone, Wolfe said, has had access to it since your return. Claudia's voice went thin. How? Now your door was locked. That word, I told her, is a comfort, not a guarantee. Wolfe's eyes slid to me. Archie. That was all. It meant, check everything, but do it quietly and do it now. I took the cylinder to the side table and set it down like it might bite. Then I went out to the hall, closing the office door behind me. I stood still for a moment, listening. The house sounded like itself. Fritz moving somewhere downstairs, the old radiators settling, the faint hum of New York on the other side of brick. No extra breath, no shuffle, no guilt. I started with the front door. Lock engaged. Chain untouched. I checked the jamb for fresh marks. Nothing. Then the windows. Front parlor, hall, Office. All latched. The back door to the kitchen was locked, and if anyone had gotten past Fritz without being noticed, well, they deserved the burglary on their resume. I went down to the kitchen. Fritz Brenner looked up from a cutting board, knife in hand, calm as a surgeon. "Archie, you are early for your hunger." "I'm early for my suspicion," I said. "Did anyone come in while I was out?" His eyebrows lifted. "Only the milkman." "We don't have a milkman." He smiled faintly. "Then I have already answered you." "Fritz," I said, "this is not a time to be poetic. Did the bell ring? Did anyone knock? Did anyone—" "There was no visitor," he said, and his face sobered. "But someone called." "On the phone?" I asked. "No," he said. At the door, the bell rang once. I went to look. There was no one. I felt my stomach tighten. "When?" "Perhaps 15 minutes ago," he said. I thought it was a boy making mischief. I returned to my work. 15 minutes ago. So that was about the time the glass decided to start talking. "Did you open the door?" I asked. "No," Fritz said, offended at the notion. I looked through the glass and saw nobody. "Yes." That was the trouble with people who enjoyed games. They didn't have to break in. They just had to make you feel like they already had. I went back upstairs, took the steps 2 at a time, and re-entered the office. Wolfe was still in his chair. Claudia was still trying not to tremble. The candle sat between them like a third witness. "Fritz says the bell rang once," I reported. "No one there." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A signal." "To what?" Claudia asked. Wolfe ignored her and addressed me. "There is another possibility, Archie." "Sure," I said. "There's always another possibility. Nice, that's how we stay employed." "Someone within the house," Wolfe said evenly. "Could have altered the cylinder." I stared at him. "You mean Fritz?" Wolfe's eyes flicked, displeased. "Do not be absurd. Fritz would sooner poison me than conspire with a blackmailer, and even then he would do it with dignity." Claudia's face tightened. "Then who?" Wolfe's voice remained flat. "You, for example. Or Mr. Goodwin, or—" He paused. "Someone who has entered and left without our knowledge." I spread my hands. "I didn't engrave anything. My talents run to sarcasm, not etching." Claudia's mouth twisted. "This is insane." "It is meticulous," Wolfe corrected, "and therefore dangerous." He leaned forward, again his version of lunging, and said, "Tonight, all must attend." "Who are all, madame?" Claudia swallowed. "The 4 of us," she said. "Marion Rook, not Calvin Fife, Jonas Brill, and Elliot Harrow." "And me." Wolfe nodded once. "Then we will invite them." Claudia blinked. "Invite them?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "To my office." Her voice rose. "You can't, Mr. Wolfe, if Harrow is directing this." "Then," Wolfe said, "it is a privilege that he will do so in my presence." I said, "You're going to summon Harrow here, on his schedule." Wolfe's eyes rested on me, calm and absolute. "No, Archie. On mine." He reached for the telephone on his desk, the one he used when he wanted to make the world behave, and lifted the receiver. "Mr. Goodwin," he said into the dial tone, "you will place the calls. Use my name. Inform them that their attendance is required at 8 o'clock. If they ask why, tell them I will explain. If they refuse, tell them I will explain anyway." Claudia's lips parted. They'll panic." "Good," Wolfe said. I took the receiver when he held it out, dialed the guild office first, and asked for Marion Rook. I could hear her voice tighten even before she came on. "Miss Rook," I said, "Archie Goodwin. Nero Wolfe requests your presence at his home at 8 tonight." There was a pause. Then, too quickly, "Why?" "He'll explain," I said. "I can't," she snapped. "He'll explain anyway," I said. 8 o'clock, she inhaled sharply. "Is this about—" 8, I repeated, and hung up before she could name it. Calvin Fife took longer. His voice was unsteady, like a man standing near a cliff pretending it's a sidewalk. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, this is highly irregular." "Everything about you is highly irregular," I told him. 8 o'clock. "Will Harrow be there?" he asked, and that told me how deep his fear ran. "You can ask him yourself," I said. There was a small choking sound. "Aye, fine." Jonas Brill answered like a lawyer, cautiously, politely, and with a faint tone of superiority that suggested he believed words were a kind of armor. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "Mr. Wolfe has no jurisdiction over me." "No," I said, "he has curiosity. 8 o'clock. And if I decline?" "Then Wolfe will explain anyway," I said, and I could almost hear him scowl through the receiver at the audacity of the phrase. There was a pause. Then, "I will attend," he said, as if doing so was a favor to civilization. That left Harrow. I dialed his townhouse number, and a butler answered with the kind of voice that was paid to sound like nothing ever happened. "This is Archie Goodwin for Mr. Harrow," I said. "You tell him Nero Wolfe requests his presence at his home at 8 tonight." There was a brief silence, just enough to tell me the butler was listening with more than his ears. "1 moment," he said. The line went dead for a few seconds, then came alive again. Harrow's voice was smooth, amused. "Mr. Goodwin, I wondered how long it would take." "Less than your ego expected," I said. 8 o'clock. "And if I'm engaged?" he asked. "Then Wolfe will explain anyway," I said. A soft laugh. "He's consistent." "He's something," I agreed. "And the candle?" Harrow asked casually, like we were discussing the weather. My fingers tightened on the receiver. "You'll see." "Perhaps," he said. "Tell Mr. Wolfe I admire his stubbornness." "I'll tell him you admire yourself," I said, and hung up. I set the receiver down and looked at Wolfe. "Now they're coming," I said. "Including Harrow?" Wolfe nodded. "Good. Now we will prepare." Claudia whispered. "Prepare for what?" Wolfe's eyes moved to the candle, then to her. "For the truth, madam, and for the attempt to control it." He turned to me. "Archie, telephone Saul Panzer. Have him come here at 7:30. Then call Inspector Kramer." I blinked. "Kramer? Already?" Wolfe's mouth tightened. "Tonight's gathering is coerced. Coercion is often accompanied by desperation." "Desperation, Archie, frequently leads to imprudence." I translated that. Something could go wrong, and Wolfe wanted the law present not to help, but to be available for packaging. I nodded and reached for the phone again. As I dialed, my eyes slid back to the glass cylinder on the side table. The etched words gleamed faintly in the lamplight, as if they enjoyed being seen. And the worst part was, whoever had put them there wanted us to read them, wanted us to feel the clock start ticking. In the brownstone, time usually obeyed Wolfe. Tonight, someone else was trying to hold the watch. The house changed character as 7:30 approached. It always did when Wolfe anticipated a confrontation. The lamps were adjusted, chairs aligned, doors closed or left open with intention. Even the silence took on posture. Claudia Vane sat rigidly, hands folded now not in fear but in resolve. She had stopped looking at the candle. That was progress of a sort, either courage or exhaustion. Saul Panzer arrived first, slipping in without ceremony, coat already off, eyes alert. He nodded to me, then to Wolfe, who acknowledged him with a grunt that passed for welcome. "Mr. Panzer," Wolfe said, "you will observe. You will not intervene unless I instruct you." Saul smiled thinly. Story of my life. Inspector Kramer arrived 5 minutes later, hat in hand, face already wearing the expression of a man who suspected he'd been invited not to help, but to be impressed. "Wolfe," he said, eyeing the room, "you make a habit of calling the police to dinner now." "I do not." Wolfe said. Dinner is at 8:30. This is business. Kramer's gaze fell on Claudia. Who's the lady? A client, Wolfe said. One who anticipates complications. Kramer grunted. You always do. At 8:05, the doorbell rang. I went to answer it because that's my job and because Wolfe never rises to greet the guilty. Marion Rook stood on the stoop, coat buttoned too tightly, eyes sharp with tension, though she stepped inside like she expected the floor to accuse her. You're prompt, I said. I don't like suspense, she snapped. Then you're in the wrong house. Calvin Fife arrived next, sweating despite the cool air, smile fixed in place like it had been nailed there. Jonas Brill followed, calm on the surface, eyes calculating angles and exits. They were seated, strategically, when the bell rang again. This time, Elliot Harrow entered as if he owned the door. He was taller than I expected, lean, impeccably dressed, with a face that wore confidence like a tailored suit. His eyes moved around the room, cataloguing, assessing, and when they found the candle, they lingered just a fraction too long. Mr. Wolfe, he said warmly. An honor. Wolfe did not return the warmth. Sit, he said. Harrow did smoothly. The room settled. Everyone waited, but Wolfe cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, you are assembled here not by courtesy, but by necessity. Each of you shares involvement in a concealed fraud concerning the St. Bartholomew Guild. Each of you believes that someone else holds evidence capable of destroying the others. Calvin Fife flinched. Marion Rook stared at the rug. Jonas Brill's lips thinned. Harrow smiled. That's a serious allegation. It is a precise one, Wolfe said. And precision is my specialty? He gestured with a finger. The candle. All eyes turned. This object, Wolfe continued, was delivered to Miss Vane with an instruction designed to coerce behavior. It has since been altered within my house, an audacious act intended to assert control. Harrow leaned back. You assume much. I deduce, Wolfe corrected. Mr. Harrow, now you engineered this. There was a ripple, sharp intakes of breath, a hiss from Marion. Harrow's smile didn't fade. On what basis? On motive, Wolfe said. You financed the manuscripts. You arranged the illicit settlement. You retained leverage by controlling documentation. When Miss Vane resisted your attempt to acquire permanent custody, you escalated. Jonas Brill spoke. This is speculation. No, Wolfe said. This is structure. You, Mr. Brill, falsified records. You ensured plausible deniability. Mr. Fife distributed influence. Miss Rook enabled access. Miss Vane provided legitimacy, but only one of you benefited from prolonged threat. Harrow shrugged. You flatter me. Wolfe's eyes hardened. You miscalculated. How so? Harrow asked. You assumed, Wolfe said, that fear would compel obedience. Instead, as it compelled disclosure, to me. Harrow's gaze flicked to the candle. And what of it? Does it tell the truth? It tells a truth, Wolfe said. Encoded on a metal strip designed to survive combustion. When burned, it would reveal selective evidence. Enough to ruin, not enough to convict. Kramer straightened. Evidence of what? Fraud, Wolfe said. But curated. Harrow laughed softly. You're suggesting I went to extraordinary lengths to scare a few board members? I am stating, Wolfe said, that you intended to burn the candle publicly, perhaps at a guild event, thereby forcing compliance or acquisition. Marion Rook whispered. You monster. Harrow turned to her, still smiling. Business is not monstrous, Marion. It's efficient. Wolfe leaned forward. Efficiency is admirable. Hubris is not. Harrow's eyes narrowed. You think you've won? I think, Wolfe said, that you have already lost control. He nodded to me. I stepped to the side table, lifted the cylinder, and turned it so the etched words caught the light. "Tonight, all must attend," I read. "You wanted witnesses." Harrow's smile thinned. "I wanted resolution." "You will have it," Wolfe said. "But not on your terms." He turned to Kramer. "Inspector, the evidence within the candle, combined with corroborating testimony, is sufficient to warrant investigation." Kramer nodded slowly. "You're all coming downtown?" Calvine Fife sagged. Jonas Brill cursed under his breath. Marion Rook closed her eyes. Harrow stood. "You're making a mistake." Wolfe's voice was cold. "No, sir, you did." Harrow's gaze locked on Wolfe's. For a moment, something like respect flickered. "Very well," Harrow said. "Now shall we see what it says?" He reached toward the candle. Saul Panzer moved, not fast, but decisive, and intercepted his hand. Wolfe spoke. "There will be no burning." Harrow laughed. "Afraid of the truth?" "No," Wolfe said. "Of spectacle." He nodded to Kramer. "Take them." As they were escorted out, Claudia remained seated, pale but upright. The door closed. Silence returned. Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "dispose of the candle. Securely." I picked it up, feeling its weight one last time. Claudia spoke softly. "Thank you." Wolfe's eyes were distant. "Truth," he said, "is best revealed by reason, not flame." I watched the door, thinking about the man with the newspaper. The bell rung once, the glass etched without entry. The game had been clever, but cleverness loses to patience. Dinner was served on time. The brownstone slept poorly that night, and so did its occupants. Fritz retired with the air of a man guarding a monastery. Claudia Vane remained in the guest room, silent as a held breath. Wolfe sat in his chair long after midnight, eyes closed, thinking. Not resting, never that. Thinking is his most strenuous exercise. By morning, he had finished. I knew it the moment I walked into the office with coffee and found him already awake, already composed, already bored with the rest of the world for lagging behind. "Archie," he said, "telephone Mr. Panzer." That was all. Saul arrived within the hour, coat damp from the morning mist, expression satisfied in the professional way that means bad news for someone else. "Peter Knoll exists," Saul said. "And then some?" Wolfe inclined his head. "Elaborate." "He's not Harrow's man," Saul continued. "Oh, he's Harrow's solution, a fixer who specializes in ethical containment, corporate boards, religious foundations, universities. He doesn't steal, he stabilizes, by creating fear." I leaned against the desk. "And the candle?" Saul smiled thinly. "A signature. He's used variations before. Not candles, objects, always symbolic, always designed to provoke confession or panic. The trick isn't what's inside. It's who talks once it appears." Wolfe's eyes opened fully. "As I surmised, the candle was never meant to burn. It was meant to move." Claudia, pale but composed, stood in the doorway. "Then what was on the metal strip?" Saul shook his head. "Nothing, or almost nothing. A few dates, one name misspelled. Enough to be plausible if revealed. Not enough to destroy anyone outright." I frowned. "Then why steal it?" Wolfe answered. "Because its continued existence was more valuable than its content. Once the admissions were made, in my presence with Inspector Kramer involved, the candle became redundant. Worse, it became dangerous to its creator." Claudia whispered. "Because it could expose him." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Mr. Knoll engineered the intimidation, but he required Mr. Harrow as a credible villain. Mr. Harrow, being arrogant and accustomed to leverage, complied, unwittingly playing the role assigned. When matters escalated to the police, Mr. Knoll retrieved the prop and prepared to vanish." I said, "Except for one problem." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Indeed, he trespassed in my house." That was the mistake. Inspector Kramer arrived shortly after noon, less hostile now, more alert. Wolfe invited him to sit, which meant something serious was about to be said. "Inspector," Wolfe began, "you have detained the wrong man for the wrong reason. Mr. Harrow is culpable of financial coercion, but not of orchestration. The architect is Peter Knoll." Kramer frowned. "I don't have him." "You will," Wolfe said calmly. "Mr. Panzer has already arranged for him to believe I'm willing to negotiate." Saul nodded. "Knoll thinks Wolfe wants the candle back." Kramer blinked. "You don't?" "No," Wolfe said. "I want him." The trap was simple, elegant, very Wolfe. That evening, Peter Knoll arrived at the brownstone alone, carrying a slim leather case and the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling rooms he did not own. He was polished, courteous, and utterly unsurprised to see me answer the door. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Mr. Wolfe is expecting me." "Yes," I said. So is everyone else." He hesitated only a fraction before stepping inside. Wolfe did not rise. He did not accuse. He did not threaten. He explained. He laid out the sequence. Guild, manuscripts, Harrow's leverage, the manufactured Italian claim, the candle as catalyst, the deliberate exposure designed to force movement. He spoke as if describing a mechanical process, removing all romance from it. Knoll listened. His expression did not change. When Wolfe finished, Knoll said, "Impressive, but circumstantial." Wolfe nodded, which is why I did not summon the police. Kramer stepped forward from the hall. Knoll smiled faintly. "Ah," Wolfe continued, "you made one error, Mr. Knoll. You assumed I would treat the candle as evidence. I treated it as behavioral stimulus. The true evidence was the confession it produced, and the necessity you felt to reclaim it." Knoll's eyes flicked just once to the leather case in his hand. "That case," Wolfe said, "contains the candle. You retrieved it personally, because you did not trust intermediaries after Harrow lost control. You intended to destroy it." Kramer said, "Open it." Knoll did not resist. He opened the case. Inside lay the glass cylinder, intact. Kramer exhaled. "Son of a—" Wolfe's voice was final. "Inspector, Mr. Knoll orchestrated coercion, trespass, and obstruction. His communications will demonstrate intent. His possession of the candle establishes continuity." Kramer nodded. "That's enough for me." As Knoll was escorted out, he turned once, almost admiring. "You're very good, Mr. Wolfe." Wolfe did not look at him. "I am sufficient." Afterward, the house slowly returned to itself. Claudia Vane sat quietly, absorbing the fact that her ruin had been narrowly sidestepped, not by mercy, but by logic. "I will resign from the guild," she said softly. Wolfe nodded. "Appropriate." "And make restitution," she added. "Necessary," Wolfe said. She looked at him. "You could have destroyed us all." "Yes," Wolfe said, "which is why I did not." She left shortly after, smaller somehow, but lighter. That evening, dinner was again on time. Fritz served with renewed confidence. Wolfe ate with satisfaction. As I poured myself a beer, I said, "You know, for an object that never burned, that candle caused a lot of light." Wolfe sniffed. "Illumination does not require combustion." I raised my bottle. "Here's to that." Wolfe looked at his plate, then at the orchids he would soon tend, and delivered his final judgment. Not as a punchline, but as a truth. "Men who rely on fear," he said, "inevitably underestimate patience. Fear is loud. Patience listens." I took a sip, glanced around the quiet brownstone, and decided that if trouble had to knock, at least it had learned better manners. And if it rang the bell once and vanished, well, we'd be ready.